On her first night, the millionaire whispered, "I will be gentle," and she discovered true love. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she didn't belong there, but somehow she couldn't leave. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, their glow reflecting off champagne glasses and designer gowns. Livia Johnson stood near the dessert table, her fingers nervously adjusting the simple black dress she'd borrowed from her roommate. At 25, she possessed a quiet beauty that she'd never learned to see. Smooth, dark skin with golden undertones, natural hair styled in elegant twists that framed her heart-shaped face, and deep brown eyes that held stories she'd never shared. "Just blend in," she whispered to herself, watching the charity gala's attendees network with practiced ease. Her boss, Mrs. Henderson, had insisted she attend as the marketing coordinator for Henderson and Associates, but Livia felt like an intruder in this world of wealth and influence. She picked up a small chocolate tart, more for something to do with her hands than from hunger. The conversations around her flowed in languages of business deals and vacation homes, territories as foreign to her as distant planets. Growing up in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Cleveland with her single mother, events like this had existed only in movies. "You look lost." The voice came from behind her, smooth and confident. Livia turned to find herself looking up, way up, at a man who seemed to command the room's attention without trying. Adrian Walker stood 6'3" with an athletic build that his perfectly tailored navy suit only emphasized. His dark hair was styled with casual precision, and his steel blue eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. Everything about him radiated power, from his confident posture to the expensive watch glinting on his wrist. "I'm not lost," Livia replied softly, immediately regretting how defensive she sounded. "Just observing." A slight smile curved his lips. "Adrian Walker." He extended his hand, and when she took it, his was warm and surprisingly gentle. "Livia Johnson." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "You work with Henderson and Associates, don't you? I saw you checking the seating arrangements earlier." She nodded, surprised he'd noticed. "Marketing coordinator. I'm here representing the firm." Adrian studied her face with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was no judgment in his gaze, no condescension, just curiosity. "This is your first charity gala." It wasn't a question, and Livia felt heat rise in her cheeks. Was her discomfort that obvious? She'd spent an hour that morning watching YouTube videos on proper etiquette, terrified of embarrassing herself or her company. "That transparent, huh?" She managed a small laugh. "Not transparent, just authentic. It's refreshing." His eyes swept the room. "Most people here are performing. You're just being yourself." Before Livia could respond, a woman in an emerald gown approached with the kind of confidence that came from generational wealth. "Adrian, there you are. The Morgans are asking about the foundation merger." "Excuse me," Adrian said to Livia, but his eyes lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary. As he walked away, Livia watched his commanding presence part conversations like a ship through water. Adrian Walker, she'd heard the name before. Real estate empire, multiple hotels, the kind of success that made headlines. What could someone like him possibly find interesting about her? The evening progressed in a blur of speeches and auction announcements. Livia found herself stealing glances across the room, catching Adrian in animated discussions with other attendees. Each time their eyes met, he offered that same subtle smile as if they shared a secret. Near the evening's end, as guests began filtering out, Livia gathered her small purse and headed toward the exit. The November air would be cold, and she'd need to call a rideshare for the 30-minute journey back to her apartment. Leaving already? She turned to find Adrian approaching, his suit jacket now casually unbuttoned. Up close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, despite his serious reputation. "It's getting late, and I have work tomorrow," she said. "May I walk you to your car?" I don't drive. I'm calling for a ride." Something shifted in his expression, not pity but understanding. "It's cold out there, let me give you a ride home." Livia's first instinct was to refuse. She'd heard the stories about Adrian Walker. Brilliant, ruthless in business, and emotionally unavailable. Women threw themselves at him for his wealth and status, and he kept them at arm's length. Getting involved with someone like him would only lead to heartbreak. But as she looked into those steel blue eyes, something made her pause. Maybe it was the way he'd spoken to her earlier, really spoken to her. not just polite conversation. Or maybe it was how he'd noticed her authenticity in a room full of pretense. "I don't know if that's a good idea," she said honestly. Adrian stepped closer, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated. The noise of the departing crowd faded around them as he leaned down slightly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Don't be afraid. I'll be gentle." The words sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. There was something in his tone, not just kindness, but a promise. And in that moment, Livia realized she was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. Sometimes the most dangerous decisions are the ones that feel safest in the moment. The valet brought around a sleek, black Tesla Model S, its pristine surface reflecting the hotel's elegant facade. Adrian opened the passenger door with practiced courtesy, and Livia hesitated for just a moment before sliding into the leather seat. The interior smelled of luxury, clean leather, and that subtle cologne she'd noticed earlier. "Where to?" Adrian asked as he settled behind the wheel, his long fingers adjusting the rearview mirror. "Riverside Gardens Apartments on Maple Street," Livia said quietly, then quickly added, "It's about 20 minutes north." She expected some reaction. Riverside Gardens wasn't exactly prestigious, but Adrian simply nodded and pulled into traffic. The city lights streamed past the windows as they drove through downtown, the silence between them comfortable rather than awkward. "Tell me about yourself, Livia Johnson," Adrian said, glancing at her as they stopped at a red light. "What do you do when you're not attending charity galas?" She tucked a loose curl behind her ear, a nervous habit from childhood. "Nothing too exciting. I coordinate marketing campaigns for small businesses mostly. Coffee shops, local boutiques, family restaurants. I help them find their voice, I guess." "You help them tell their stories." Something like that. She was surprised by how he phrased it, like what she did actually mattered. "What about you?" "Besides owning half the city's hotels." A soft laugh escaped him. "Only a quarter, actually." When she smiled, he continued more seriously. "I build spaces where people create memories, wedding receptions, anniversary dinners, business deals that change lives. I like to think I'm in the memory business." Livia studied his profile as he drove. There was something unexpected about Adrian Walker, a thoughtfulness that contradicted the cold businessman reputation she'd heard about. The way he talked about his work, like it meant something beyond profit margins. "Do you have family?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Sorry, I don't mean to pry." "It's fine. My parents live in Martha's Vineyard now, retired early, spend their time sailing and arguing about dinner reservations." His smile faded slightly. "What about you?" "Just my mom and me. She works double shifts at Cleveland General Hospital. She's a nurse. Has been for 20 years. Livia's voice carried quiet pride. "She's the strongest person I know." "Is that where you're from, Cleveland?" "Born and raised. Moved here 8 months ago for the job with Henderson and Associates. It's my first real marketing position." She paused, wondering why she was sharing so much. "Biggest risk I ever took, honestly." Adrian turned onto Maple Street, the neighborhood shifting from downtown high-rises to modest apartment complexes with small gardens and neat sidewalks. It was a far cry from the luxury of the hotel district, but it was clean and safe, the best Livia could afford on her starting salary. "Risk implies potential for reward," he said thoughtfully. "What's the reward you're hoping for?" The question caught her off guard. Most people asked about her goals or plans, but Adrian was asking about deeper motivations. "I want to prove I belong somewhere," she admitted, "that I'm good at something that matters." As they pulled into the parking lot of her complex, Livia noticed Mrs. Delacroix from 3B walking her small terrier, Buster. The elderly woman waved, and Livia waved back, acutely aware of the contrast between Adrian's expensive car and her surroundings. "This is me," she said unnecessarily. Adrian parked but didn't immediately unlock the doors. Instead, he turned to face her fully, his steel blue eyes serious in the dim parking lot lighting. "Livia, can I ask you something?" She nodded, though her heart rate quickened. "At the gala tonight when I walked up to you, you looked like you were ready to disappear. Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Livia could give him a safe answer, something polite and dismissive. Instead, she found herself being honest again, a dangerous habit around this man. "Because I don't know how to be in spaces like that. I don't know the rules, the right things to say, the right way to act. I spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not special enough. Tonight, surrounded by all those perfect people," she trailed off, embarrassed by her vulnerability. "And yet, You were the most genuine person in that room. You don't have to say that. I'm not in the habit of saying things I don't mean. His voice was gentle but firm. Livia, those people you admired tonight, half of them are miserable. They're playing characters they think they're supposed to be. You were just you. She looked down at her hands, overwhelmed by the intensity in his voice. Why did you ask me about the ride home? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it all evening. Because in a room full of people trying to impress me, you were the only one who made me forget why I was there. The admission sent a flutter through her chest. This was Adrian Walker, successful, powerful, sought after by countless women. Yet he was sitting in her apartment complex parking lot, talking to her like she mattered. I should go, she said, though she made no move toward the door. Should. He repeated the word thoughtfully. What do you want to do? The question was simple, but it felt loaded with possibility. Livia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not the controlled confidence he'd worn at the gala, but something more vulnerable, something real. I want, she started, then stopped. What did she want? I want to know what happens next. Adrian's smile was different this time, slower, more genuine. So do I. As Livia finally stepped out of the car, she heard him call her name softly. She turned back to find him leaning slightly toward the passenger window. Livia, this isn't over. Standing in the cool November air, watching his taillights disappear around the corner, she realized that everything she thought she knew about her quiet, predictable life had just changed. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what came next. He said it wasn't over, but she never expected it to begin so soon. 3 days had passed since the gala, and Livia found herself checking her phone more often than she cared to admit. Tuesday morning brought the familiar routine of her small office at Henderson & Associates, reviewing social media analytics for Moonbeam Cafe's latest campaign and drafting copy for Grandmama Rosie's Soul Kitchen's new menu launch. Earth to Livia, called Tessa Whitmore from the desk across from her. At 28, Tessa was the firm's graphic designer and Livia's closest work friend, a petite redhead with an infectious laugh and an uncanny ability to read people's moods. You've been staring at that same report for 10 minutes, just thinking about the Henderson campaign strategy, Livia lied, minimizing her email tab where she'd been unconsciously hoping to see Adrian's name. Uh-huh. And does this strategy involve a certain tall, dark, and handsome millionaire from Saturday night? Livia's head snapped up. How did you... Honey, Mrs. Henderson told the entire office about you leaving with Adrian Walker. You're practically office legend now. Tessa grinned wickedly. So spill, what's he like? Is he as intimidating as the tabloids make him seem? Before Livia could respond, her phone buzzed. Her heart did a small flip when she saw the unknown number, but the message made her stomach drop. Ms. Johnson, this is Camille Sinclair, Mr. Walker's assistant. Mr. Walker would like to invite you to lunch today at 1 p.m. at Bellacourt Restaurant. Please confirm your availability. C.S. What's wrong? Tessa asked, noticing Livia's expression. You look like you've seen a ghost. His assistant just texted me. For lunch. Livia showed Tessa the message. Tessa's eyes widened. Adrian Walker has an assistant arrange his lunch dates. That's very formal. That's what I was thinking. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe Saturday night didn't mean what I thought it meant. Livia's insecurities, never far from the surface, began to resurface. Maybe he just feels obligated because he gave me a ride home. Or, Tessa said gently, maybe he's nervous too, and this is how successful businessmen ask women out. Text back yes, before you overthink yourself out of something good. Livia stared at the message for another moment, then typed, Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there. Livia Johnson. The response came almost immediately. Wonderful. Mr. Walker is looking forward to seeing you again. C.S. Bellacourt Restaurant occupied the top floor of the Meridian Tower, offering panoramic views of the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Livia arrived 10 minutes early, wearing her best work dress, a navy blue wrap dress that her mother had bought her for graduation. She felt underdressed the moment she stepped off the elevator. The hostess, an elegant woman with silver hair, greeted her warmly. Ms. Johnson? Right this way. Mr. Walker is waiting. Adrian rose from a corner table as she approached, and Livia's breath caught. In daylight he was even more striking, the sharp lines of his face softened by a genuine smile, his charcoal grey suit perfectly tailored to his tall frame. Livia. He moved to pull out her chair, a gesture so natural it seemed automatic. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. This place is... She looked around at the sophisticated decor and city views. Incredible. I thought you might like it. The chef here, Marcel Dubois, creates what he calls emotional cuisine, food that tells stories. Adrian settled across from her, his steel blue eyes warm with what looked like nervous energy. I thought that might appeal to someone in the storytelling business. She smiled, touched that he'd remembered their conversation about helping businesses find their voice. You have a good memory. When something matters to me, I remember everything. The weight of his words settled between them as a server appeared with menus and water glasses. Livia tried to focus on the elegant descriptions of each dish, but her awareness kept drifting to Adrian. The way he listened intently when she spoke, how his fingers drummed silently on the table when he was thinking. "Can I ask you something?" she said, as they waited for their appetizers. "Anything. Why did you have your assistant text me? It felt very official." Adrian's expression grew thoughtful. "Honest answer? Because I wasn't sure you'd say yes if I asked directly, and because..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I haven't asked someone to lunch in a long time. Someone I actually wanted to get to know, I mean. I was nervous." "You were nervous?" The idea seemed impossible. "You run a business empire. Business is easy. It follows rules, has clear objectives. This..." He gestured between them. "This is uncharted territory for me." Their appetizers arrived, delicate butternut squash soup for her, seared scallops for him, but neither moved to eat immediately. "Adrian, can I ask why you're single?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. "I mean, you must have opportunities." He was quiet for so long she worried she'd overstepped. Finally he spoke. "Because most people see what I have, not who I am. And honestly, until recently, I preferred it that way. Cleaner, less complicated." "What changed recently?" His eyes met hers across the table. "I met someone who looked at me like I was just a person, not a portfolio or a business opportunity, just Adrian." Livia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I still think you might be giving me too much credit, and I think you're not giving yourself enough." He leaned forward slightly. "Livia, Saturday night, when you talked about wanting to prove you belong somewhere, I understood that more than you know. How could you possibly understand that? You're successful, established. I'm successful because I learned to be what people expected. The ruthless businessman, the cold negotiator. But sometimes I wonder if I've become so good at being what others need that I've forgotten who I actually am." The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the confident Adrian Walker from the business pages. This was someone questioning himself, searching for something real. "So who are you, Adrian Walker, when you're not being what others need?" He smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she'd seen from him. "I'm still figuring that out, but I know I'm someone who finds you fascinating. Someone who's been thinking about our conversation for 3 days straight. Someone who hopes this lunch is the first of many." As if summoned by his words, Livia's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Baby girl, how's work treating you? Remember, you're stronger than you think you are. Love you. Mama." The timing made her smile, and she showed Adrian the message. "My mum has perfect timing. She sounds like a wise woman." "She is. She raised me to believe I could do anything, even when the world told me otherwise." Livia's voice grew soft. "I just wish I believed it as much as she does." Adrian reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. His touch was warm, steady, and completely unexpected. "Maybe that's something we can figure out together." As his thumb traced softly across her knuckles, Livia realized she was no longer thinking about whether she belonged in this restaurant, in this moment, or in his world. For the first time in her life, she was simply present, not worried about tomorrow or haunted by yesterday, but right here, right now. And it felt like the beginning of everything. Sometimes the weather knows exactly when to interrupt your perfectly planned life. The rain started as gentle drops against Livia's office window, but by 5 o'clock, it had transformed into a proper November downpour. She stood at the window of Henderson and Associates, watching umbrellas bloom like flowers along the sidewalk below, when her phone rang. "Don't tell me you're planning to walk to the bus stop in this weather?" came Adrian's voice, warm and slightly amused. Livia smiled despite herself. They'd been talking every evening since their lunch 3 days ago, long conversations that stretched past midnight, covering everything from childhood dreams to favorite books, to the way morning coffee tasted different depending on your mood. "I have an umbrella," she said, though she was looking at the flimsy thing with doubt. "That's not an umbrella, that's a decorative accessory. I'm downstairs." "You're what?" She craned her neck to look down at the street and spotted the familiar black Tesla idling at the curb. "Adrian, you can't just show up at my work." "I can if my girlfriend is about to get soaked walking to a bus stop." The word girlfriend sent a flutter through her chest. They hadn't officially defined what they were, but somehow hearing him say it felt natural, right? "Your girlfriend is perfectly capable of—" "Livia," his voice grew gentle. "Let me take care of you, please." 5 minutes later, she was sliding into the passenger seat, shaking raindrops from her hair. Adrian handed her a towel, soft, expensive, and clearly kept in the car for exactly this purpose. "Do you always rescue damsels in distress?" she asked, dabbing at her damp sleeves. "Only the ones who refuse to admit they're in distress." He pulled into traffic, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the storm. "How was your day?" As they drove through the rain-slicked streets, Livia found herself telling him about the campaign she'd been developing for Indigo Books and Coffee, a small independent bookstore owned by a woman named Fern Castellano, who'd immigrated from Italy 30 years ago and still made the best tiramisu in the city. "She has this way of recommending exactly the right book for each customer," Livia explained, unconsciously animated as she talked about her work. "It's like she can see into their souls, but she's struggling to compete with the big chains, and I'm trying to help her tell her story in a way that brings people in." Adrian listened with the same focused attention he gave everything, occasionally asking questions that showed he truly understood what she was trying to achieve. When they stopped at a red light, he turned to study her profile. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You light up when you talk about your work. Really light up. It's beautiful to watch." Heat crept up her neck. Even after a week of conversations, compliments from Adrian still caught her off guard. "It's not exactly saving the world. Isn't it, though? You're helping people connect with stories, with each other. That matters, Livia." The light turned green, but she found herself studying his profile now. The strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved confidently on the steering wheel, the small scar near his left temple that she'd never noticed before. "What happened here?" she asked gently, reaching out to trace the barely visible mark. His hand came up to cover hers, holding it against his face for a moment. "Fell off my bike when I was 8. Racing my cousin Donovan down my grandfather's driveway." "Did you win?" "Of course. Even bleeding I had to win." His smile was rueful. "Some things never change." "Is that why you're successful? Because you always have to win?" The question seemed to surprise him. They were nearing her apartment complex, but instead of turning into the parking lot, Adrian pulled into the small park across the street. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see the playground equipment glistening wet and empty. "Maybe," he said thoughtfully. "Or maybe I learned to win because losing hurt too much." "What did you lose?" Adrian was quiet for so long she wondered if she'd pushed too far. Finally, he spoke. "My father's approval. His respect. He built everything from nothing, came from a family that had nothing, worked construction to put himself through business school, built his first hotel with loans he could barely afford. He wanted me to understand that value, to earn what I had. But you did earn it. You expanded the business, built an empire. Did I? Or did I just take what he built and make it bigger?" Adrian's voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just a very expensive caretaker of someone else's dream." Livia turned in her seat to face him fully. In the dim light of the car, with rain creating patterns on the windows around them, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "Adrian, what do you want? Not what your father wanted, not what's expected of you. What do you want?" He looked at her then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Until recently, I thought I knew. Success, respect, control. But now—" He reached over and touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "Now, I think I want something I've never had before." "What's that?" "Peace, connection, someone who sees me, not just what I've accomplished." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Someone who makes me want to be better than I am." The rain drummed harder against the roof, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. Livia felt her heart racing as Adrian leaned closer, his eyes searching hers. "Livia, I need you to know something." "What?" "I've never felt this way about anyone before. Never wanted to share my thoughts, my doubts, my fears. Never wanted to know everything about someone else's day, their dreams, their favorite way to drink their morning coffee." "Cream, no sugar," she whispered, mesmerized by the intensity in his voice. "Cream, no sugar," he repeated, smiling. "See? I remember everything about you because everything about you matters to me." When he kissed her, it was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. Her hand found the back of his neck, fingers threading through his dark hair, and she tasted rain and promises on his lips. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes still closed. "This is dangerous," he murmured. "Why?" "Because I'm falling for you, Livia Johnson. Hard and fast and completely out of control. And that terrifies me." Outside, the rain continued its relentless rhythm, but inside the car, wrapped in each other's warmth, Livia felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Then we'll be terrified together," she whispered back. And as Adrian's arms tightened around her, she realized that some of the best things in life happened when you stopped trying to control everything and simply let yourself fall. She never expected to find love in a kitchen that wasn't hers. Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Adrian's penthouse, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floors. Livia stood at the kitchen island, wearing one of his Oxford shirts over her jeans, trying to figure out his state-of-the-art espresso machine. After 3 failed attempts, she'd given up and was making coffee the old-fashioned way with a French press she'd found hidden behind gleaming appliances that looked like they'd never been used. "Need help?" Adrian's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, hair mussed, wearing grey sweatpants and a white t-shirt that showed off the athletic build she'd only glimpsed beneath his business suits. Even disheveled, he was breathtaking. "Your espresso machine is smarter than me," she admitted, gesturing at the intimidating device. "I found this buried behind what I think might be a pasta maker and something that looks like it belongs on a spaceship." Adrian laughed, moving to wrap his arms around her from behind. "My housekeeper Marlena insists I need every kitchen gadget ever invented. I think I've used maybe 3 of them." "Marlena has expensive taste." Livia leaned back against his chest, savoring the simple intimacy of the moment. They'd spent the previous evening on his couch, talking until nearly dawn, about her childhood in Cleveland, his complicated relationship with his father, dreams they'd never shared with anyone else. "She also thinks I don't eat enough vegetables and work too much." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "She's probably right about both." "When does she usually come in?" "Not until Tuesday. We have the place to ourselves." His arms tightened around her. "I was thinking we could make breakfast, maybe walk down to Riverside Market. There's a vendor there who makes incredible fresh bread, and I want to show you the view from the harbor." The casual way he planned their day together, like they were a real couple with real routines, sent warmth through her chest, but it also triggered a familiar anxiety, the voice that whispered she didn't belong in this world of penthouses and housekeepers and harbor views. "Adrian," she said carefully, "what are we doing here?" She felt him go still behind her. "Making coffee? You know what I mean." She turned in his arms to face him. "This, us. What happens when the novelty wears off?" His steel blue eyes grew serious. "Is that what you think this is, a novelty? I think you're a successful, wealthy, powerful man who could have anyone, and I'm—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "I'm a marketing coordinator from Cleveland who uses coupons and shops at Target and gets nervous ordering wine because I don't know the difference between a Merlot and a Cabernet." Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You're brilliant. You're kind. You listen when I talk about things that matter to me, and you challenge me when I'm being an ass. You light up when you talk about helping people tell their stories, and you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves you." But for how long? The question hung between them, heavy with her insecurities and his uncertainty about the future. Before Adrian could answer, his phone rang from the living room, a sharp, insistent sound that broke the morning spell. "Leave it," Livia said softly. But the phone kept ringing, and Adrian's expression shifted to one she recognized, the businessman emerging from the gentle man she'd been getting to know. "I should check. It might be important." As he walked to the living room, Livia heard him answer with his professional voice. "Adrian Walker." She couldn't make out the other side of the conversation, but she could hear the change in his tone. Clipped, efficient, distant. The Adrian she'd been falling for disappeared, replaced by the CEO the world knew. "No, that's not acceptable. I don't care what Hutchinson thinks about the timeline. Yes, I understand the implications. I'll be there in an hour." When he returned to the kitchen, his jaw was tight with frustration. "Work?" she asked unnecessarily. "Crisis with the Boston project. The city council is threatening to pull our permits because of some environmental concerns that should have been addressed months ago." He ran a hand through his hair. "I have to go in. Sort this out before it becomes a bigger problem." "Of course." Livia forced a smile, but something cold settled in her stomach. I should probably head home anyway. I have some work to catch up on. Livia, he stepped toward her, then seemed to catch himself. She could see him calculating the cost of staying versus the cost of the crisis waiting for him. It's fine, Adrian. Really, this is what your life looks like, I get it. But as she gathered her purse and jacket, she realized she didn't get it. Not really. How did relationships work when one person could be called away at any moment? When crisis management took priority over lazy Sunday mornings? At the door, Adrian caught her hand. This isn't how I wanted today to go. I know. She stood on her toes to kiss him softly. Handle your crisis. We'll figure out the rest later. As the elevator doors closed between them, Livia saw her reflection in the polished metal and barely recognized herself. Disheveled hair, oversized shirt, the glow of someone who'd been thoroughly kissed and completely confused. Back in her own apartment 20 minutes later, the contrast was stark. Her tiny kitchen with its mismatched dishes and single-cup coffee maker, her second-hand furniture and bills stacked on the counter waiting to be paid, the silence that felt oppressive after the warmth of Adrian's penthouse. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Baby girl, called to check on you but got voicemail. Hope you're having a good weekend. Remember what I always told you. You belong wherever your heart is happy. Love you." "Mama." Livia stared at the message, her mother's words echoing in her mind. You belong wherever your heart is happy. But what happened when your heart was happy in a world that might not want you to stay? She was still thinking about that question when her phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she answered. "I hate this." His voice was raw with frustration. "I hate that I had to leave. I hate that you looked hurt even though you tried to hide it. And I hate that I don't know how to balance this, wanting you and needing to be responsible for everything else." "Adrian, no. Let me finish. I've spent my entire adult life putting business first because it was safe, predictable. People depend on me, employees, investors, partners. But Livia, for the first time in my life, I want something more than success. I want mornings like this morning. I want to learn how you take your coffee and what makes you laugh and how to be the man you deserve." Tears pricked at her eyes. "But what happens when those two things conflict? When being with me interferes with being responsible for everyone else? Then we figure it out. Together." His voice grew determined. "Because losing you isn't an option I'm willing to consider." As she hung up the phone, Livia realized that falling in love wasn't just about finding someone who made your heart happy. It was about learning to trust that happiness enough to fight for it. And maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. Sometimes love means letting someone see the parts of your life you've kept hidden. Thursday afternoon found Livia standing outside Indigo Books and Coffee, clutching a folder of revised marketing materials and trying to calm her nerves. Through the large windows, she could see Fern Castellano arranging a display of Italian poetry books, her silver-streaked hair caught in the warm light filtering through the cafe's vintage lampshades. The bell chimed softly as Livia entered, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee beans and old paper that made this place feel like sanctuary. "Livia, cara mia." Fern looked up with the warm smile that had made her a neighborhood institution. At 62, she moved with the graceful energy of someone who'd found her calling. "You look different today, glowing. You have that look of a woman in love." Heat crept up Livia's neck. Is it that obvious? To someone who's been matching people with the right books for 30 years, yes, it is obvious. Fern gestured toward their usual corner table. "Come, tell me about this man who makes you glow like a candle." As they settled with cups of Fern's legendary espresso, Livia found herself sharing more than she'd intended. About Adrian, about the penthouse morning, about her fears that she was falling for someone whose world she might never truly fit into. "Ah," Fern said knowingly, "you think love is about matching like colors in a painting, but sometimes the most beautiful art comes from contrast, light and shadow, rough and smooth." Before Livia could respond, the bell chimed again, and she looked up to see Adrian walking through the door. Her heart did its familiar flutter at the sight of him, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, scanning the cafe until his eyes found hers. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said as he approached their table. "Your colleague Tessa said I might find you here. Adrian, this is Fern Castellano, the owner. Fern, this is Adrian Walker." Fern's eyes sparkled with interest as she stood to shake his hand. "Ah, so this is the man who makes our Livia glow." "Fern," Livia warned, embarrassed, but Adrian smiled. Not his polished business smile, but something genuine and warm. She makes me glow too, Mrs. Castellano, though I'm probably not supposed to admit that. Please sit, Fern insisted, already moving toward the counter. I make you both my special tiramisu, and you, she pointed at Adrian, you tell me what your intentions are with this beautiful girl. As Fern bustled away, Adrian settled beside Livia, close enough that she could catch his familiar cologne. I like her, he said quietly. She's wonderful. She has this gift for seeing people, really seeing them. Livia watched Fern preparing their dessert with practiced care. This place is struggling, though. The big chains are making it harder for small businesses like this to survive. Is that why you're so passionate about helping her? Partly, but also because places like this matter. They're where community happens, where stories are shared. She looked around at the mismatched furniture and walls lined with books in multiple languages. Fern came here with nothing 30 years ago. This cafe is her dream made real. Adrian followed her gaze, and she saw him taking in details: the worn but comfortable chairs, the bulletin board covered with local announcements, the corner where a group of elderly men played chess every afternoon. It's beautiful, he said, and she could tell he meant it. Fern returned with 3 plates of tiramisu and settled across from them with a satisfied expression. So, Adrian Walker, Livia tells me you are a very successful businessman. I try to be. Success means different things to different people, Fern said wisely. For me, success is Mr. Benedetto, finding the perfect book to help him through his wife's illness. Is little Keisha discovering she loves poetry? Is watching 2 people fall in love over coffee and arguments about Italian literature? Adrian listened with the same focused attention Livia had come to love about him. You're right. I think I've been measuring success by the wrong metrics. And what would be the right metrics? Fern asked. Adrian looked at Livia, his steel blue eyes soft. Whether the people I care about are happy, whether I'm building something that matters, not just something that makes money. As they talked, Livia watched Adrian transform. The businessman facade melted away as he asked Fern about her journey from Italy, listened to her stories about the neighborhood's changes, even helped her move a heavy box of new releases without being asked. He is good man, Fern whispered to Livia when Adrian stepped outside to take a brief phone call. But more important, he looks at you like you are a precious gift. Do not let fear make you throw away such blessing. When Adrian returned, his expression was apologetic. I'm sorry, but I need to cut this short. There's been a development with the Boston situation. Livia felt the familiar pang of disappointment, but before she could respond, Fern stood up. I'll take these, she said, wrapping up the remaining tiramisu. But Adrian, you come back, bring Livia for dinner Sunday night. I make my nonna's ragu, and you tell me more about these hotels you build. I'd be honored, Adrian said, and Livia could tell he genuinely meant it. Outside the cafe, Adrian pulled Livia close, his hands framing her face. Thank you for letting me into your world. Fern is incredible. And that place, I understand now why you light up when you talk about your work. You really liked it? I loved it. I loved seeing you there, seeing how much you care. He kissed her softly. I love watching you be yourself. As his car arrived, Adrian hesitated. Livia, there's something I need to tell you. The Boston crisis. It might require me to travel next week, I don't know for how long. The words hit her like cold water. Oh, I'm trying to handle it remotely, but if the investors insist on face-to-face meetings, of course, I understand. She forced a smile. Business comes first. No, his voice was firm. You come first. I'm learning that the hard way, but you come first. This trip, if I have to go, come with me. Adrian, I can't just drop everything and... Why not? Take a few days off. Let me show you Boston. Let me prove that my world doesn't have to mean leaving yours behind. Standing on the sidewalk outside Fern's cafe, watching the man she was falling in love with wait for her answer, Livia realized this was a crossroads moment. She could stay safe, keep her distance, protect herself from the possibility of getting hurt, or she could take the leap and trust that love was worth the risk. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, if you have to go to Boston, I'll come with you. The smile that spread across Adrian's face was brilliant, transforming his features with pure joy. As he kissed her again, more deeply this time, Livia felt something shift inside her chest, a door opening to possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. Maybe Fern was right. Maybe the most beautiful art really did come from contrast, and maybe she was finally ready to find out what masterpiece they could create together. She had never imagined that saying yes to love could feel so much like jumping off a cliff. The private jet's leather seats were more comfortable than Livia's bed at home, but comfort was the last thing on her mind as Boston's skyline came into view through the small window. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her navy dress, the nicest thing she owned, purchased specifically for this trip with money she probably shouldn't have spent. "You're nervous," Adrian observed from the seat across from her. Even at 30,000 feet, he looked perfectly composed in his charcoal suit, reviewing documents on his tablet with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. "Terrified is more accurate," she admitted. "I've never been on a private plane. I've never been to a business meeting where millions of dollars are at stake. I've never been anywhere as someone's—" She struggled with the word. "Girlfriend," he supplied gently, setting aside his tablet. "Partner, the woman I'm falling in love with." Her heart did its familiar flutter, but anxiety still churned in her stomach. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if your business associates think you've lost your mind bringing some nobody from—" "Stop!" Adrian unbuckled his seatbelt and moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. "First, you're not a nobody. You're brilliant and creative, and you see possibilities where others see problems. Second, these people's opinions don't matter to me anymore. Yours does. But this deal matters to you. Yes, it does, but not more than you do." His steel blue eyes were serious. "Livia, I need you to understand something. 6 months ago, this crisis would have consumed me. I would have worked 18-hour days, sacrificed everything else to make sure every detail was perfect. But now I look at problems differently. I ask different questions, not just how do I win, but what kind of success do I actually want? And a lot of that shift is because of you." The plane began its descent, and Livia felt her ears pop along with her confidence. Through the window, she could see Boston Harbor, the historic buildings mixing with modern skyscrapers in a way that reminded her of the contrasts in her own life lately. Their hotel, Adrian's hotel, she corrected herself, was a masterpiece of understated luxury. The Meridian Boston occupied a converted historical building in Back Bay, its lobby combining original brick walls with contemporary art and furniture that managed to feel both elegant and welcoming. "Mr. Walker, welcome back," greeted the manager, a polished woman in her 40s named Cordelia Ashworth. Her smile was professional but warm, and she treated Livia with the same respectful attention she gave Adrian. "Your suite is ready, and the conference room has been prepared for your 4 o'clock meeting." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Livia watched Adrian transform again, not into the cold businessman she'd feared, but into someone who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation. Staff members greeted him by name, and he knew details about their families, their career goals, their recent achievements. "How do you remember all that?" she asked once they were alone in the suite. "Because they matter. This business, these hotels, they're not just investments. They're people's livelihoods, their dreams." He moved to the window, looking out over the city. "My father taught me that buildings are just brick and steel until people make them home." The suite was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a separate living area with a view of the Charles River, and decor that felt more like a sophisticated apartment than a hotel room. But Livia found herself drawn to a framed photograph on the side table, a much younger Adrian with an older man who shared his strong jaw and determined eyes. "Your father?" she asked. "That was taken when we opened our first hotel together. I was 26, convinced I knew everything." His expression grew thoughtful. "He died 2 years later, heart attack in his office at 7 in the morning, still trying to solve problems. I'm sorry. He never saw what the company became, never got to enjoy any of it." Adrian's voice carried a weight of old regret. "Sometimes I wonder if all this success is just me trying to prove something to a man who's not here to see it." Before Livia could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. "The investors want to move the meeting up to 3 o'clock. Are you sure you want to sit in on this? It's going to be tedious." "I want to see you in action," she said honestly. "I want to understand this part of your life." An hour later, Livia found herself in a conference room that screamed serious money, mahogany table, leather chairs, and a view of Boston Common that probably cost more per year than her entire salary. The investors were exactly what she'd expected. 3 men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of confidence that came from never having to check their bank balance before making a purchase. "Adrian," said the eldest, a silver-haired man named Thurston Blackwell, "we appreciate you coming personally, but these environmental concerns are becoming a PR nightmare. The protesters, the media attention, it's affecting our timeline and our budget." Livia watched Adrian as he listened, noting how he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, steel blue eyes calculating. When he spoke, His voice was measured, authoritative. Thurston, with respect, I think we're looking at this wrong. The environmental concerns aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. What if instead of fighting the criticism, we embrace it? Make this the most sustainable luxury hotel in Boston's history. That will cost millions more, protested another investor, a heavy-set man named Fletcher Morrison. Short term, yes. Long term, it positions us ahead of industry trends and attracts the kind of clientele willing to pay premium prices for environmentally conscious luxury. Adrian pulled out his tablet, swiping to a presentation. Look at these demographic studies. Millennial and Gen Z travelers, who represent the future of our industry, prioritize sustainability. They'll pay 20% more for accommodations that align with their values. As the meeting progressed, Livia found herself mesmerized by Adrian's transformation. This wasn't the gentle man who'd helped Fern move books, or the vulnerable one who'd shared his fears about living up to his father's legacy. This was a strategist, a visionary, someone who could see 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. But what struck her most was how he wove his personal values into his business arguments. He talked about creating jobs for local artisans, partnering with Boston area environmental organizations, building something that would make the community proud rather than just profitable. You've given us a lot to think about, Blackwell said finally. We'll need to review the numbers, discuss this among the full board. After the investors left, Adrian slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Well, that went better than expected. They didn't fire me. They were impressed, Livia said. I could see it in their faces when you presented the sustainability angle. That was brilliant. It was risky. Conservative investors don't usually like big changes to established plans. But it was right. And you knew it was right. She moved to sit on the arm of his chair. That's why you're good at this. Not just because you're smart or strategic, but because you care about more than just profit. Adrian looked up at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Do you know what the best part of that meeting was? What? Looking across the table and seeing you there. Knowing that someone I love was watching me try to be the kind of man worth loving. The word love hung in the air between them, spoken so naturally it took a moment for its full weight to register. When it did, Livia felt something shift inside her chest, not the flutter of infatuation, but something deeper, more certain. Adrian, I know it's too soon to say that. I know we've only known each other 3 weeks, but I can't pretend I don't feel it. Looking down at him, this powerful man who'd just commanded a room full of millionaires but was now vulnerable and uncertain, Livia realized that love wasn't about timing or logic or being ready. It's not too soon, she whispered, because I love you too. And as he pulled her down into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her forget about conference rooms and investors, and all the ways their worlds were different, Livia knew she was exactly where she belonged. Love, she was learning, was equal parts beautiful revelation and terrifying responsibility. 2 weeks after Boston, Livia found herself in Adrian's kitchen again, but this time she wasn't struggling with the espresso machine. She was making dinner, her grandmother's recipe for jambalaya, while Adrian sat at the island, sleeves rolled up, helping her prep vegetables with the focused attention he brought to everything that mattered to him. Your knife skills are getting better, she teased, watching him carefully dice bell peppers. Pretty soon you won't need Marlena to feed you. Marlena would be devastated. She lives to lecture me about proper nutrition. He paused his chopping to watch her season the rice. Where did you learn to cook like this? My grandmother, Nana Celeste. Every Sunday after church, she'd have the whole family over, and I was her little sous chef. She said cooking was love you could taste. The easy domesticity of the moment, chopping vegetables, sharing stories, the scent of garlic and onions filling the air, felt more intimate than any fancy restaurant dinner. But underneath Livia's contentment ran an undercurrent of uncertainty that had been building since their return from Boston. Since the night they'd said, I love you, everything had intensified. Adrian called her every morning, sent flowers to her office for no reason, had quietly arranged for a car service to pick her up from work so she wouldn't have to take the bus. The gestures were thoughtful, generous, and somehow made her feel more displaced in her own life. Livia, Adrian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. You've been stirring that for 5 minutes. What's going on in that beautiful head of yours? She set down the wooden spoon, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. Adrian, what are we doing? Making dinner. You know what I mean. She turned to face him, leaning against the counter for support. This, us, all of this is happening so fast, and I feel like I'm losing myself somewhere in the middle of it. Adrian set down his knife, his expression growing serious. What do you mean, losing yourself? I mean, the car service, the flowers, the way your world keeps expanding around mine until I can't see where I end and it begins. She gestured around the pristine kitchen. I love being here with you, but I also love my little apartment and my bus rides and my life that fits in my budget. I don't want to lose that person just because I fell in love with you. I never asked you to lose that person. No, you didn't ask, but it's happening anyway. Her voice grew small. Sometimes I feel like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize, someone who expects car services and expensive dinners, and I don't know if I like who I'm turning into. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his steel blue eyes studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Are you having second thoughts about us? No. Yes. I don't know. Frustration leaked into her voice. I love you, Adrian. I love you so much it scares me, but I also need to be able to love myself, and lately I feel like I'm disappearing. The pain that flickered across his features made her chest tight. I never meant for you to feel that way. I wanted to take care of you, to make your life easier. I know, and I appreciate everything you do, truly. But easier isn't always better. She moved closer to him, placing her hands on his chest. I need to know that you fell in love with Livia from Cleveland, who takes the bus and shops with coupons, and gets excited about helping small businesses tell their stories. Not some polished version of me that fits better in your world. You think I want to change you. I think you want to love me, and sometimes love makes us want to fix things that aren't broken. Adrian covered her hands with his thumb tracing circles on her knuckles, a gesture that had become familiar and precious. Livia, you want to know what I fell in love with? Your laugh when you got frustrated with my espresso machine, the way you light up talking about Fern's Cafe. How you insisted on paying for your own coffee the first 3 times we went out together because you didn't want to owe me anything. Then why does it feel like you're trying to upgrade my life? Because, he struggled with the words, because I've never been in love before, and I don't know how to love someone without trying to solve their problems. It's what I do, Livia. I see obstacles and I remove them. I see needs and I fill them. But maybe what I see as solutions, you see as invasions? The vulnerability in his admission broke something open in her chest. Oh, Adrian, I don't want to lose you, he said quietly, but I also don't want to love you wrong. Before she could respond, her phone rang from the living room. They both ignored it, but it rang again, then a third time. You should get that, Adrian said. Might be important. Livia reluctantly left the kitchen, finding her phone on the coffee table. Her mother's name flashed on the screen, and something in her stomach dropped. Her mother never called multiple times unless something was wrong. Mama? Baby girl. Her mother's voice sounded strained, tired. I didn't want to worry you, but I'm in the hospital. Livia's world tilted. What happened? Are you okay? Just some chest pains. They're running tests. Probably nothing serious, but they want to keep me overnight for observation. Her mother's voice carried the forced brightness she used when she was scared, but trying not to show it. I'm fine, honey. Really. I'm coming home. Livia, no. You have your job, your life there. I'm probably going to be discharged tomorrow. Mama, I'm coming home. Her voice was firm, final. I'll be there tonight. As she hung up, she turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, concern written across his features. Everything okay? My mum's in the hospital in Cleveland. Chest pains. She says it's nothing, but Livia was already moving toward her purse, her mind racing through flight times and logistics. I'll call the pilot. We can be in the air in an hour. Adrian, no, this is expensive, and she's probably fine. Livia? His voice was gentle but firm. This is your mother. This is what the plane is for. She stopped moving, looking at him across the living room. Here was her answer to the question she'd been struggling with. Not Adrian trying to upgrade her life or solve problems that didn't need solving, but Adrian understanding what mattered most and making it possible. Thank you, she whispered. Always, he said simply. Always. For anything that matters to you. As they quickly packed and headed for the airport, Livia realized that love wasn't just about finding someone who wanted to take care of you. It was about finding someone who knew the difference between taking care of you and taking over your life. And maybe, just maybe, they were learning that difference together. Sometimes you have to go back to where you started to understand how far you've come. Cleveland General Hospital looked exactly as Livia remembered, tired but determined, like everything else in her hometown. The fluorescent lights cast their familiar harsh glow over worn linoleum floors, and the scent of disinfectant, mixed with cafeteria coffee, created an atmosphere that was both sterile and oddly comforting in its familiarity. Adrian walked beside her through the corridors, and Livia was acutely aware of how out of place his expensive suit looked among the practical scrubs and worried families. But when she glanced at him, his focus was entirely on her, not judging his surroundings, just present for whatever she needed. "Room 314, she murmured, checking the signs overhead. Her heart hammered against her ribs with each step. They found her mother sitting up in bed, looking smaller than Livia remembered but unmistakably herself. Natural hair pulled back in a colourful head wrap, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed what looked like patient charts. "Mama." Livia's voice came out as barely a whisper. Denise Johnson looked up and her face transformed with relief and joy. "Baby girl, you came." Her eyes shifted to Adrian, taking him in with the assessing gaze that had intimidated Livia's dates since high school. "And you brought someone." "Mama, this is Adrian Walker." "Adrian, my mother, Denise Johnson." Adrian stepped forward with genuine warmth. "Mrs. Johnson, it's an honor to meet you. Livia talks about you constantly." "Does she now?" Denise's smile was cautious but not unkind. "Well, Mr. Walker, thank you for getting my stubborn daughter here so quickly, though I told her she didn't need to come rushing across the country for a little chest tightness." "Mama, you were in the emergency room." "Indigestion and anxiety," Denise said dismissively, though Livia noticed the monitoring wires still attached to her chest. "Dr. Patel wants to keep me one more night for observation, but I'll be discharged tomorrow." "What did the test show?" Adrian asked, and Livia was touched by the genuine concern in his voice. "Everything's normal. Heart strong, blood works fine. Just been working too many doubles, not sleeping enough, eating too much takeout from the vending machine." Denise studied Adrian with shrewd eyes. "You look like a man who understands work consuming your life." "I'm learning not to let it," Adrian said quietly, glancing at Livia. A nurse appeared in the doorway, a young woman with intricate braids and a kind smile. "Mrs. Johnson, time for your evening meds." "Oh, hello," she said, noticing the visitors. "I'm Zara, your mum's nurse tonight. This is my daughter Livia and her friend," Denise said, the pause deliberate. "Boyfriend," Livia corrected gently. "Adrian is my boyfriend." The word felt both natural and momentous in this setting, in front of her mother, in the place where she'd grown up believing she wasn't enough for grand gestures or fairy tale endings. After Zara left with promises to check back in an hour, an awkward silence settled over the room. Denise looked between Livia and Adrian with the expression she'd worn when trying to solve particularly complex scheduling problems at the hospital. "So, Adrian Walker," she said finally, "tell me about yourself. What do you do, and more importantly, what are your intentions with my daughter?" "Mama," Livia protested, but Adrian smiled. Not his polished business smile, but something more humble. "I run a hotel company that my father started, and my intentions—" He looked at Livia, then back at her mother. "I love your daughter, Mrs. Johnson. She's changed my entire perspective on what matters in life." "Love is a big word," Denise said carefully. "Livia's always been tender-hearted, trusting. I worry about people taking advantage of that." "I would never hurt her," Adrian said with quiet intensity. "But I understand your concern. In your position, I'd be suspicious too." Denise studied him for a long moment. "You have money." It wasn't a question, and Adrian didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes, ma'am. And Livia doesn't." "Mama," Livia started, but Denise held up a hand. "I'm not being rude, baby. I'm being practical. Money changes things, creates imbalances. I've seen it before." She looked directly at Adrian. "My daughter is brilliant and beautiful, and worth more than any bank account, but the world doesn't always see it that way." "I see it that way," Adrian said simply. "She makes me want to be better than I am. She challenges me to think beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. She's teaching me what it means to build something that matters. And what happens when the newness wears off, when she's not a novelty anymore?" The question hung in the air, and Livia felt her chest tighten. This was the fear that had been gnawing at her, voiced by the person who knew her best. "Mrs. Johnson," Adrian said carefully, "I understand why you're asking these questions, but respectfully, I think you're underestimating your daughter. She's not a novelty to me. She's home. She's the first person who's ever made me feel like myself instead of just successful." Denise's expression softened slightly. "And what does that self look like?" "Someone who cares more about building lasting relationships than closing deals. Someone who'd rather spend Sunday morning making breakfast with Livia than reviewing contracts. Someone who's learning that the best investments aren't always financial." A small smile tugged at the corner of Denise's mouth. That's a pretty answer. But pretty answers are easy when everything's new and exciting. Before Adrian could respond, Livia found her voice. Mama, I need to tell you something. Both Adrian and her mother turned to look at her. I've been scared too. Scared that I don't fit in his world, scared that I'm changing into someone I don't recognize, scared that this is all too good to be true. She reached for Adrian's hand, needing the anchor of his touch. But I realized something recently. Love isn't about fitting into someone else's world or them fitting into yours. It's about building a new world together. Baby girl, let me finish. You raised me to be strong, to know my worth, to never settle for less than I deserve. Well, I deserve someone who sees all of me, not just the parts that are convenient or comfortable. And Adrian does. He sees my ambition and my insecurities, my dreams and my fears. He doesn't try to fix me or change me. He just loves me. Tears pricked at her eyes as she continued. And yes, he has money and I don't. And yes, that creates complications. But we're learning to navigate those together. Because the alternative, giving up on love because it's complicated, is not an option I'm willing to consider. The room fell quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Denise looked between her daughter and Adrian, something shifting in her expression. Well, she said finally, I can see where your stubbornness comes from, Mr. Walker. My daughter's made up her mind about you. Yes, ma'am. And I've made up mine about her. Denise nodded slowly, then turned to Livia with the smile that had gotten them both through countless difficult moments over the years. Then I guess we better figure out how to make this work, hadn't we? As visiting hours wound down and they prepared to leave for the night, Livia hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of cocoa butter and determination that had always meant safety. I like him, Denise whispered in her ear. But more than that, I like who you are when you look at him. You look like a woman who knows her worth. Walking out of the hospital hand in hand with Adrian, under the Cleveland sky that had watched her grow from a scared little girl into a woman brave enough to love without guarantees, Livia felt something settle in her chest. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Some conversations change everything, even when you think you're not ready to have them. 3 months after Cleveland, on a crisp February evening, Livia found herself standing on the private beach behind Adrian's weekend house in the Hamptons. The February air was cold enough to see her breath, but she needed the space, the sound of waves, the vastness of the ocean to contain what felt like too much emotion for any indoor space to hold. Behind her, through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the beach house, she could see Adrian pacing in the living room, running his hands through his dark hair in a gesture she'd come to recognize as his response to problems he couldn't solve with logic or strategy. They'd been fighting for 2 hours, not the gentle disagreement of their early days, but something raw and necessary that had been building beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect relationship. It had started with something small, a charity gala invitation that had arrived addressed only to Mr. Adrian Walker and guest. Not to Livia by name, not as his girlfriend, just guest. A small thing, really, the kind of social oversight that happened all the time in his world. But it had triggered something in Livia that surprised them both with its intensity. You could have called them, she'd said, holding the cream-colored invitation in hands that trembled slightly. You could have made sure they knew my name. It's just an oversight, Livia. These things happen. Do they? Or do they happen because I'm still the woman you bring places instead of the woman who belongs in those places? The conversation had spiraled from there, touching on every insecurity, every compromise, every moment over the past few months when one of them had bent to fit into the other's world without saying it out loud. Now, standing on the beach with the sound of his footsteps approaching behind her, Livia knew they were about to have the conversation she'd been both dreading and needing since the day they'd met. Livia. His voice was careful, controlled. Please come inside, it's freezing out here. I can't, she said without turning around. I can't be in that house right now, surrounded by all that perfection, pretending everything is fine when it's not. What isn't fine? Tell me what's wrong and I'll fix it. She turned then, and the expression on her face must have been fierce because he stepped back slightly. That's exactly the problem, Adrian. You think everything can be fixed. You think love is a problem to be solved instead of a choice to be made every day. That's not... Isn't it? Her voice cracked with emotion. When I told you I felt like I was losing myself, you tried to fix it by backing off. When your mother sent me that passive-aggressive email about appropriate attire for family dinner, you tried to fix it by hiring me a stylist. When I said I missed my independence, you tried to fix it by insisting I keep my apartment, even though I spend every night at your place. Adrian's jaw tightened. I was trying to respect your boundaries. No, you were trying to manage me. There's a difference. Tears she'd been holding back for months finally spilled over. Adrian, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. But I can't keep being your project. You're not a project. Then what am I? The question came out raw, desperate. Because some days I feel like your girlfriend, your partner, someone you actually see and value and trust. And other days I feel like a problem you're still trying to solve, a rough edge you're trying to smooth out so I'll fit better in your world. The sound of waves filled the silence between them. Adrian stared at her, and she could see the moment he really heard what she was saying. Not just the words, but the pain beneath them. Livia, he said quietly, is that really what you think? I don't know what to think anymore. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold it had gotten. I thought I was stronger than this. I thought I could be with someone like you without losing myself in the process. But every time someone treats me like an accessory instead of a person, every time you try to solve my feelings instead of just sitting with them, every time I catch myself changing to fit better into your life, I wonder if I'm becoming someone I don't recognize. Someone like me, Adrian repeated, and there was something sharp in his voice now. What does that mean exactly? You know what it means. No, I don't. Explain it to me. His composure was cracking, revealing something raw underneath. Because it sounds like you're saying that being with me is somehow beneath you, that my world, my life, the things I've worked for, are somehow corrupting you. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Because that's what I'm hearing, that I'm too rich, too successful, too established for you to be with me and still feel good about yourself. The accusation hit like a slap. How dare you? How dare I what? Point out that you're the one creating distance between us? That you're the one who keeps pulling back every time we get closer? I pull back because I'm scared. The words exploded out of her. I pull back because everyone in your life looks at me like I'm temporary, like I'm some phase you're going through before you find someone more appropriate. I pull back because I love you so much it makes me stupid, and I can't afford to be stupid about this. Why can't you afford it? Because when this ends, Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. Not if, when. Livia realized what she'd revealed, and the words hung between them like a blade. Adrian, no, I heard you. When this ends. Not if it ends, not if we can't work things out. When? He stepped closer, his steel blue eyes blazing. You've been planning our breakup this entire time. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? His control finally snapped. Fair would be you trusting me when I tell you I love you. Fair would be you believing me when I say this is real, that you're not some experiment or phase or project to me. Fair would be you fighting for us instead of constantly preparing for us to fail. I am fighting for us. No, you're fighting against us. You're so terrified of getting hurt that you keep one foot out the door at all times. His voice broke slightly. Do you have any idea what that does to me? Loving someone who's already planning to leave? The raw pain in his voice stopped her cold. In all their months together, through all their careful negotiations and gentle compromises, she'd never seen him like this. Completely unguarded, his heart laid bare. I never planned to leave, she whispered. But you never planned to stay either, did you? Not really. Not permanently. You've been treating this like a beautiful detour instead of a destination. The truth of it hit her like ice water. He was right. Somewhere deep down, she had been protecting herself by keeping their future conditional, theoretical, something that might happen rather than something she was actively building toward. I'm scared, she said again, but quieter now. Adrian, I'm so scared of not being enough for you. Not smart enough, not polished enough, not from the right background. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you could have anyone, and you'll wonder why you chose someone who comes with so many complications. And I'm scared too, he said, his voice gentle again. I'm scared that I don't know how to love someone without trying to take care of every problem they have. I'm scared that my money and my background and my family will always be barriers between us. I'm scared that I'll never be able to convince you that when I look at you, I don't see complications, I see home. They stood there on the beach, the sound of waves providing a rhythm for their breathing, their honesty, their fear. What do we do? Livia asked finally. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the ocean. When he spoke, his voice was steady, determined. We decide, right now, tonight. Either we're building something together, or we're not. Either you trust me with your heart completely, or we stop pretending this can work. Adrian, I'm serious, Livia. I can't keep loving you halfway. I can't keep tiptoeing around your fears while you keep one foot out the door. If we're going to do this, we do it all the way. Scared, messy, imperfect, all the way. The ultimatum hung between them, not cruel but necessary. She could see in his eyes that he meant it, that he loved her too much to accept anything less than her full presence in their relationship. "What does all the way look like?" she asked. "It looks like you moving in with me. Really moving in, not keeping your apartment as an escape route. It looks like us making decisions together instead of you making them alone out of fear. It looks like you trusting that when I say I choose you, I mean it completely." "And what does it look like from your side?" "It looks like me learning to sit with your feelings instead of trying to fix them. It looks like me accepting that loving you means letting you be yourself, even when that makes things more complicated. It looks like both of us building something new instead of me trying to fit you into my existing life." Livia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before them. She could walk away now, preserve her independence, protect herself from the vulnerability of complete commitment. Or she could take the leap she'd been avoiding since the night they met, the leap into love without guarantees, without escape routes, without protection. When she opened her eyes, Adrian was watching her with an expression that was patient but resolute. "I choose all the way," she said quietly. "Scared and messy and imperfect, all the way." The smile that broke across his face was brilliant, transforming his features with relief and joy, and something that looked like coming home. "All the way," he agreed, pulling her into his arms. And as he kissed her there on the beach, with the sound of waves bearing witness to their commitment, Livia realized that the scariest conversations were often the ones that led to the most beautiful destinations. 1 year later, she still returned to the same place, but this time with a soft smile and a steady step. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their shared penthouse, casting golden patterns across the hardwood floors, where Livia's books mingled with Adrian's business journals, where her grandmother's quilted throw draped over his Italian leather sofa, where two lives had learned to become one without losing their individual shapes. Livia stood in their kitchen, truly theirs now, making coffee with the confidence of someone who had finally stopped asking permission to take up space. Her natural hair was longer now, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, and she wore one of Adrian's dress shirts over her favorite jeans, the casual intimacy of the gesture no longer feeling borrowed but earned. Through the window she could see the city waking up below, and somewhere in that urban landscape was the small office where her marketing consultancy had grown beyond her wildest dreams. 3 employees now, a client list that included both the family-owned bakery down the street and a sustainable fashion startup that had just secured national distribution. Success that felt authentically hers. "Good morning, beautiful." Adrian's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep and contentment. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head in the gesture that had become their morning ritual. "Good morning, handsome." She leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. No more questioning whether she belonged in his embrace, in his life, in the space they'd built together. "Sleep well?" "Always do when you're here." It was a simple statement, but loaded with the weight of the year that had brought them to this moment. The year since that February night on the beach, when they'd chosen each other completely, without reservations or escape routes. Moving in together had been both easier and harder than either of them had expected. Easier because they'd already learned each other's rhythms, harder because combining lives meant more than sharing closet space. It meant navigating whose career took priority when conflicts arose, whose family traditions to honor during holidays, how to balance individual dreams with shared goals. But they'd figured it out, one conversation at a time, one compromise at a time, one choice at a time, to choose love over fear. "What's that smile about?" Adrian asked, noticing her expression as she poured coffee into 2 mugs, his black, hers with cream and a touch of honey. "Just thinking about how different this feels from a year ago." "Different how?" "Settled, like we're not still auditioning for each other." She turned in his arms, studying the face that had become home to her. "Do you remember what you said that night on the beach, about loving me halfway?" "I remember everything about that night. I was thinking, I don't think I understood what you meant until now, about what it means to love someone all the way." Adrian's steel blue eyes grew attentive. Even in casual moments like this, he gave her his full focus, a quality that had drawn her to him from the beginning and still made her feel cherished every day. "What does it mean to you now?" "It means trusting you with the parts of me I used to keep private. It means building our life together instead of trying to protect my life from you. It means—" She paused, searching for the right words. "It means I stopped waiting for you to decide I wasn't enough and started believing I was exactly what you wanted. You are exactly what I want. Always have been. I know that now. Really know it, not just hope it." They moved through their morning routine with the choreographed ease of people who had learned to share space without losing themselves. Adrian reading business news on his tablet, while she reviewed client proposals, both of them stealing glances and small touches as they prepared for their respective days. "Don't forget," he said as they gathered their things to leave, "dinner with your mother tonight. And don't you forget to actually eat lunch today instead of surviving on coffee and determination." "Yes, ma'am." His smile was the one reserved just for her, softer than his business smile, more genuine than his public persona. Livia, I love our life. Even the parts that are messy and complicated and don't fit neatly into your perfectly organized world. Especially those parts." As they rode the elevator down together, Livia caught their reflection in the polished metal and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Not because she'd changed dramatically, but because she looked like someone who knew her worth, someone who belonged wherever she chose to be. The day passed in the comfortable rhythm they'd established. Client meetings for her, board meetings for him, text messages exchanged throughout the afternoon that ranged from practical, pick up wine for dinner, to romantic, missing you already, to purely silly, Fern says you still need to work on your Italian pronunciation. That evening, as they sat around their dining table with Denise Johnson, who had flown in for her quarterly visit and had long since stopped interrogating Adrian about his intentions, Livia found herself listening to the conversation with a sense of deep contentment. "So when are you two going to make this official?" Denise asked with the directness that had never softened, even as her affection for Adrian had grown obvious. "Mama," Livia protested, but she was smiling. "What? I'm not getting any younger and I'd like to see my daughter properly settled." "Properly settled?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, amused. "What would that look like, Mrs. Johnson?" "A wedding, grandchildren, the whole 9 yards." Denise's expression grew softer. "I want to see her happy, that's all. And she is happy with you, I can see that. But I also want to see you committed to that happiness." Adrian reached across the table to take Livia's hand, his thumb tracing the familiar pattern across her knuckles. "Mrs. Johnson, I can promise you that I'm completely committed to your daughter's happiness. As for the timeline," he trailed off, and something in his expression made Livia's heart skip. Before she could ask what he was thinking, he was standing up, moving to the kitchen with the excuse of clearing plates. But instead of returning with dessert, he came back carrying a small velvet box. "Adrian," Livia breathed, her hand flying to her chest. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, settling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. "Something about how you changed my life, how you made me want to be better than I was, how loving you taught me what success really means." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Had? But looking at you right now in our home, with your mother here blessing whatever comes next, all I can think to say is that I love you, Livia Johnson. I love your stubbornness and your kindness and your laugh and your dreams and the way you make everything better just by being yourself. I love the life we've built together, and I want to keep building it for the rest of our lives." He opened the box to reveal a ring that was perfectly her, elegant but not ostentatious, a solitaire diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like promises. "Will you marry me?" Through her tears, she could see her mother dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, could hear the traffic from the street below, could smell the remnants of their dinner and the flowers Adrian had brought home just because it was Tuesday, and he'd thought she might like them. All the small ordinary moments that had built into something extraordinary. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course yes," as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because he'd learned her sizes and preferences and dreams with the same attention he gave to everything that mattered to him. Livia thought about the woman who had stood in a charity gala 18 months ago, convinced she didn't belong in fairy tale endings. That woman had been right, in a way. She hadn't belonged in a fairy tale. She had belonged in something better, a real love story with real people making real choices every day to build something lasting together. "I love you too, Adrian Walker," she said, as he pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "All the way, remember?" "All the way," he agreed and kissed her, as her mother applauded and the city lights twinkled beyond their windows, and their future stretched out before them like an unwritten book full of blank pages, waiting to be filled with whatever story they chose to tell together. Later, after her mother had returned to her hotel with promises to call every one of her friends to share the news, after they'd cleaned up dinner and called his parents and hers to share their joy, Livia and Adrian stood on their balcony, looking out over the city that had brought them together. "No second thoughts?" he asked softly. "Only one." His expression grew concerned. "What's that?" "I wish I could go back and tell that scared woman at the charity gala that everything was going to work out better than she ever dared to dream." Adrian's smile was soft, understanding. "What would you tell her?" "That the best things in life happen when you stop protecting yourself from them. That love isn't about being perfect for someone else. It's about being perfectly yourself and finding someone who treasures that person. That sometimes the scariest leap is the one that leads you exactly where you were always meant to be." As they stood there together, engaged and in love, and planning a future that honored both their dreams, Livia realized that the promise Adrian had made that first night had been kept in ways she never could have imagined. "Don't be afraid. I'll be gentle." He had been gentle with her fears, gentle with her independence, gentle with the process of learning to love without losing themselves. And she had learned to be gentle too, with his learning curve, with his need to fix things, with the man who had built walls around his heart and was still sometimes surprised to find them gone. Gentle but not fragile, strong but not solitary, independent but not isolated, together but not lost. Perfect. What did this story teach you about the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in love? Would you have made the same choice to trust completely, despite the risks? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.